On November 29, 2023, an Air Force Special Operations Command CV-22 impacted the water 1/2 mile off the coast of Yakushima Island, Japan, killing all 8 of the Air Force personnel aboard. As we covered in episodes at the time, the crash caused the Naval Air Systems Command, better known as NAVAIR, that has ultimate authority over the V-22 program, to ground all variants of the aircraft. About 3 months later, that grounding order was lifted with a number of training requirements placed on squadrons before they could return to full mission status. And then 2 months after that, the Pentagon revealed that the Osprey was restricted from flying greater than 30 minutes away from home base, a severe operational limit. NAVAIR has been mum about the root cause behind the fatal crash throughout the months following the grounding order, return to flight, and follow-on operational restrictions. But now the U.S. Air Force has released the Accident Investigation Board report. Before we get into what those findings are, let's review some of the basics about the V-22 that I documented on a previous episode. There are 3 models of the V-22. The MV-22 is operated by the United States Marine Corps as a medium-lift assault support aircraft. The Navy operates the CMV-22 as a carrier onboard delivery aircraft, and the Air Force Special Operations Command operates the CV-22. The CV-22 is the most technologically advanced of those 3 models and also the most expensive, coming in at about $80 million per copy. It's designed for rapid insertion and extraction of Special Operations Team and the Combat Search and Rescue mission. It's also designed for survivability into and out of the objective. The CV-22 has both a sophisticated radar jamming system, the AN/ALQ-211, and an IR countermeasure system, the AAQ-24. The CV-22 was used extensively by AFSOC in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, the V-22 program was shut down from 2000 to 2002 following 2 mishaps, one in Arizona that killed 23 Marines, and one in New River, North Carolina that killed 4 Marines. At that time, the Secretary of Defense, Cheney, wanted to shut the program down, and the airplane was returned to flight in the fall of 2002 with a radically retooled test program. Full disclosure, I worked in the V-22 program at that time as the communications director, and in that capacity, I worked very closely with the developmental test team. And also, I was able to fly with VMM 263 out of Bastion during my time in Afghanistan. So the promise of the V-22 is the tilt rotor technology, meaning you can go from helicopter mode to airplane mode, and that makes the V-22 twice as fast, and it can go twice as far as the rotary wing aircraft that it replaced. However, the V-22 is still subject to the laws of physics. So what allows you to tilt the prop rotors forward also creates higher than normal disc loading with each one of those prop rotors. If you have asymmetric thrust, the airplane is going to roll off very dramatically, and pilots have to react quickly. And if you're close to the ground when this happens, the results could be catastrophic, as was the case in this mishap in 2017 aboard the USS Green Bay, where the pilot lost power in close and he didn't have enough time to react before the airplane hit the side of the ship. The CV-22 that crashed on November 29, 2023 was operated by the 21st Special Operations Squadron, 353rd Special Operations Wing at Yokota Air Base in Japan. On that day, the mishap Osprey had the call sign of Gundam 22 and was part of a 3-plane mission that involved a fuel stop at Marine Corps Air Station Iwakuni, followed by a second leg for in-flight refueling practice with a Marine Corps C-130J and an airdrop of Special Operations personnel from another CV-22, Gundam 2-1. That leg was supposed to land at Kadena Air Base for another fuel stop before returning directly to Yokota. Gundam 2-3 was the airborne spare for the mission, dedicated to support any emergent maintenance requirements. The crew aboard Gundam 2-2 included the pilot, with 953 flight hours in the CV-22, who had served as a flight instructor and was a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Weapons School, a co-pilot with 311 flight hours in the CV-22, a flight engineer responsible for monitoring aircraft systems, navigation, communication, and mission-related avionics, and making recommendations to the pilot in the event of abnormal conditions, a tail scanner to perform hoist operations, cargo loading, gunnery, and keeping the aircraft clear of obstructions during taxi and landings, a direct support operator responsible for intelligence information during the mission, and 3 members of a Special Operations Forces medical element. Because of a radio problem with Gundam 2-1, Gundam 2-2 flew the first leg of the mission from Yokota to Iwakuni as a single ship. Gundam 2-2 followed about 30 minutes later. Once refueled on deck, Gundam 2-1 and 2-2 launched at 1309 local on a southbound heading and climbed to 8,000 feet to rendezvous at the assigned waypoint with the C-130J for in-flight refueling training. Approximately 40 minutes after the takeoff and in the vicinity of Miyazaki International Airport, Gundam 2-2 got a left-hand prop rotor gearbox chip burn emergency advisory on the control display unit, or CDU, in the cockpit. So let's take a look at the drive system in the V-22's Rolls-Royce engine. The CV-22 Bravo has two prop rotor gearboxes, one mounted in each nacelle. The prop rotor gearbox transmits power and provides speed reduction from the engine to the prop rotors. The prop rotor gearbox chip detection system provides a visual indication to flight crew if it detects ferromagnetic debris in the gear oil. Each prop rotor gearbox contains 3 chip detectors. The prop rotor gearbox chip burn left or right is a visual-only advisory that posts to the control display unit anytime a chip is detected and is successfully burned off by a detector. If 3 consecutive chip burn advisories post during one continuous flight, the result is a change in landing criteria to land as soon as practical. The prop rotor gearbox chip's left or right caution is an auditory and visual post to the CDU anytime a chip fails to burn off for 3 consecutive automatic chip burn attempts. If after receiving the PRGB chips warning, there are normal secondary indications, then a crew should land as soon as possible. If there are abnormal secondary indications, then the crew should land immediately. 23 seconds after the first prop rotor gearbox chip burn advisory posted on the CDU, a second one came up. The pilot didn't immediately acknowledge the warnings and instead communicated with the other V-22s about new flight routing that would take them farther west to expedite reaching the air refueling point. The pilot then acknowledged the chip burn lights and asked the crew if anyone besides him had ever seen one during a flight before, to which only the tail scanner said he had. As the formation approached the southern tip of mainland Japan, 12 minutes after the second chip burn advisory, a third warning posted on the CDU. The flight engineer informed the crew that in accordance with the flight manual's guidance, they were now in a land as soon as practical situation. The flight engineer also told the pilot that he wasn't seeing any secondary indications beyond the warnings on the CDU. The crew discussed that eventually the nearest divert would be Okinawa, which was 300 nautical miles away at the time, but made no mention of the fact that Kanoya Air Base was only 10 nautical miles behind them. As the pilot transmitted the situation to Gundam 2-1, a fourth prop rotor gearbox chip burn advisory posted. At the same time, the flight engineer left his seat to assist the tail scanner with troubleshooting a problem he was having in the back of the aircraft with the intelligence broadcast receiver. Over the next 10 minutes, the crew discussed range to Kadena and other things they heard about chip burn warnings. A fifth chip burn advisory posted, which caused the flight engineer to get back into his seat up front. 3 minutes later, a left prop rotor gearbox chips caution posted, and the master caution tone went off. The pilot verified with the flight engineer that they were now in a land as soon as possible situation. He radioed, "We've got chips," to Gundam 2-1 and passed control of the aircraft to the co-pilot to allow himself to focus on the emergency procedures, directing a heading of 111 degrees towards Yakushima, their closest planned divert field. Gundam 2-1 asked if they needed mutual support for the divert, and the pilot of Gundam 2-2, who was also the overall mission commander, told them to continue the mission. He then radioed Gundam 2-3 and told them to get a maintenance team ready to meet them at Yakushima Airport. At that time, closer divert possibilities existed, including a vertical landing option at Kuroshima and a roll-on landing option at Satsuma Iojima Airport. Again, remember the V-22 can land vertically, so they do not need a lot of runway to set the aircraft down. 4 minutes after the prop rotor gearbox chips caution posted, without further discussion of divert options, the crew began a gradual descent to 1,000 feet to set up the Osprey for entry into the aircraft traffic pattern at Yakushima Airport. Now, Yakushima Airport does not have an operating control tower and receives aerodrome flight information service remotely from Kagoshima Airport. As the aircraft approached Yakushima, the pilot made a transmission on Yakushima radio frequency that they were inbound for landing, but he received no response. As they got closer, the crew heard radio traffic on the Yakushima radio frequency, indicating an aircraft was taxiing for takeoff on runway 32. At that point, the pilot requested to land on runway 32, and the airport operations officer asked if they were an emergency situation, to which the pilot responded, "Affirm." Now, that was the first time in the mishap sequence that the term emergency was used either in crew conversations or external radio calls. The airport operations officer advised that they should hold due to the traffic on the runway, and the pilot directed the co-pilot to hold near the approach end of runway 32 for that departing traffic. Then the Osprey posted a chip detector fail advisory on the CDU indicating a chip detector failure had occurred. The pilot commented that he was no longer worried since he assumed the previous warnings were errors due to a faulty chip detector. The pilot next directed the co-pilot to, quote, "do one more big right-hand loop and come in and just set up for landing," end quote. After which the flight engineer verbally reminded the crew that the left prop rotor gearbox chips advisory was still posted, which the pilot acknowledged. Shortly afterwards, when the commercial aircraft began its takeoff roll out of Yakushima, the co-pilot turned the Osprey towards the runway, starting a normal approach from traffic pattern altitude of 1,000 feet. 2 minutes before they were going to touch down, the co-pilot slowed the aircraft and thumbed the nacelles more vertical in preparation for landing. Approximately 1/2 mile from the approach end of runway 32, the aircraft was at 785 feet, 106 knots ground speed, with the nacelles at 66 degrees, flaps set to auto, and the landing gear retracted. So basically they had completed the before landing checklist except for having the gear down. At 14:39 and 53 seconds local, 49 minutes after the first left-hand prop rotor gearbox chip burn advisory had posted, the aircraft experienced a catastrophic failure of the left-hand engine's prop rotor gearbox and abruptly rolled left, rapidly exceeding 90 degrees angle of bank. The aircraft rolled fully inverted and then back upright when it hit the water slightly nose down, instantly killing all 8 of the Air Force personnel aboard. The Aircraft Accident Investigation Board concluded the following. The mishap was caused by a catastrophic failure of the left-hand prop rotor gearbox and subsequent rapid cascading failures of the mishap aircraft's drive system. Failure of the left-hand prop rotor gearbox high-speed planetary section was most likely initiated by a crack in one of the high-speed pinion gears and fatigue cracking of the associated pinion gear's bearing cage, which eventually fractured through the high-speed planetary carrier assembly. At least one piece of the failed high-speed planetary pinion wedged in the high-speed carrier assembly, grinding against the high-speed sun gear's teeth until they were completely removed. The removal of the gear teeth prevented torque being applied to the left-hand mast. Once the left-hand prop rotor gearbox failed, an onset of rapidly cascading malfunctions occurred, all happening in less than 6 seconds. The board also found that the decisions made by the mishap pilot were causal. These decisions caused a prolonged mishap sequence of events that removed any consideration of an earlier landing at a different landing location. Specifically, the mishap pilot's decision to continue with the mission after the third chip burn advisory posted in the cockpit and the situation became land as soon as practical, and the mishap pilot's decision to land at Yakushima Airport instead of closer locations after the left prop rotor gearbox chips caution posted in the cockpit and the situation became a land as soon as possible were causal. The mishap pilot and the mishap crew did not plan for, deliberate, or even discuss closer suitable landing options after the left prop rotor gearbox chips caution posted. And then finally, as what they call a substantially contributing factor, the board blames NAVAIR for inadequate risk management. It says, the prop rotor gearbox is a complex, critically important system, the failure of which can result in the total loss of aircraft and aircrew. The board finds, by the preponderance of the evidence, that inadequate action at the program level substantially contributed to the mishap. Now, NAVAIR has not released any specific root cause information beyond the information detailed in this latest Accident Investigation Board report, and it's not publicly known what's being done to mitigate the chance of other V-22 prop rotor gearbox failure-related crashes. But we'll keep the situation in our scan and relay any information as we get it, so if you're not already a subscriber, become one so you do not miss anything going forward. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.